Ever met someone who seemed smart on the surface, but something felt off? Like they had all the answers, yet somehow missed the point? What if I told you that true wisdom isn't about what you say, but what you see, what you question, and what you're willing to change? In my years of observing people and patterns, one truth keeps resurfacing. Intelligence is often mistaken for wisdom, but there are 6 clear signs that separate the wise from the foolish. Now, before you shrug off this list or chuckle at the idea of spotting foolish behavior, let me explain why this matters. This isn't about putting people in boxes or passing judgment. It's about growth. It's about awareness. And more importantly, it's about making sure we're not unknowingly walking down the same path ourselves. Because here's the thing, sometimes the most dangerous kind of ignorance is the one we don't recognize in ourselves. Understanding these 6 unmistakable signs can help us avoid falling into mental traps, break free from our own stubborn patterns, and even gently guide others who may not realize they're stuck. Each sign carries more than just a red flag. It holds a story, a lesson, and an opportunity for self-reflection. So, if you're ready to explore this road to deeper awareness, let's take the first step. The first sign. A closed mind isn't just a personal limitation. It's a fortress built brick by brick, layer by layer, with fear, pride, and the refusal to evolve. People like this don't just reject new ideas. They actively resist growth. They stay inside their comfortable box where the rules are familiar and anything new feels threatening. But here's the catch. What often looks like confidence is really just fear in disguise. True confidence, that comes from knowing you don't have all the answers and that you're open to learning more. Let me tell you about Mark. He was a department manager at a company I used to work with. Smart, experienced, and respected. But Mark clung tightly to old methods. Even when his team started lagging behind competitors, he insisted that the way we've always done it was still the best way. When a younger employee suggested using modern project management software to boost efficiency, Mark shut the idea down immediately. His response? "We've done it this way for a decade, and it's worked fine." The result? Other teams adapted, innovated, and soared ahead. Mark's team? They struggled. Efficiency dropped, results declined. But instead of reflecting inward, Mark pointed fingers at his staff, at the market, even at luck. Never once did he question whether his mindset was the root of the problem. That's the danger of a closed mind. It doesn't just block new ideas, it blocks the growth of everyone nearby. Wise people, in contrast, embrace discomfort. They know that not knowing everything is a strength, not a weakness. They lean into curiosity. They ask questions, and that's exactly what Stoic philosophy teaches us, that the first step toward wisdom is letting go of certainty. Now, with that lesson in mind, let's move forward to the second sign of foolishness. It's one you've probably encountered more often than you think. Previously, we explored how a closed mind can trap not only the person who holds it, but everyone around them. Now let's look at another behavior that quietly erodes wisdom, one excuse at a time. The second sign, constant blaming. True wisdom doesn't come from always being right. It comes from the courage to adapt, to admit fault, and to grow from it. If you ever find yourself or someone else at work falling into the trap of resisting change, remember this: embracing innovation doesn't just improve results, it also transforms the environment into a space where people can truly thrive. And sometimes it begins with 5 simple words: I was wrong. I'm learning. Only when we break down the walls of pride and stubbornness can wisdom truly begin to take root. That leads us to the second unmistakable sign of a foolish person: the habit of constant blaming. People like this are skilled at crafting excuses. To them, nothing is ever their responsibility. A failed project? The market was tough. A missed promotion? The boss was biased. But we all know what this really is: a shield, a defense mechanism to avoid facing uncomfortable truths. The problem? That shield quickly turns into a prison. It locks them in a cycle where they can't grow because they refuse to accept any role in their setbacks. Let me give you an example. Lisa, an event organizer I once collaborated with. She was in charge of planning a high-profile conference. But when the event ended up being a flop due to low attendance, Lisa didn't take a moment to reflect. Instead, she pointed fingers at the marketing team, claiming they hadn't promoted it well enough. But when we looked deeper, the truth came out. Lisa had delayed sending the event details to the marketing department, which threw off the entire timeline. Despite this, she continued to shift the blame, never acknowledging her part in what went wrong. And what happened? Her colleagues began to lose trust. Without accountability, her leadership crumbled. Eventually, Lisa stepped down from her position, not because she lacked talent, but because she lacked responsibility. Responsibility may feel heavy, but it's the doorway to growth. Wise people own their mistakes not because they enjoy being criticized, but because they see mistakes as feedback, not failure. Stoic philosophy teaches us that taking charge of our actions is the foundation of mastering life itself. So if you ever catch yourself slipping into a pattern of blaming others, stop and ask, have I truly done everything I could? Is there something I missed? Blaming won't change the past, but taking responsibility, that changes you. The wise don't run from their errors. They study them, they grow from them, and they rise stronger. And now that brings us to the third sign of foolishness, one you'll recognize the moment it walks into a room. Arrogance, as we've seen, blinds us to our faults and shuts the door to growth. But those who embrace humility, they open themselves to learning, and that's where true wisdom begins. The third sign, arrogance. Over humility, genuinely wise individuals don't feel the need to dominate conversations or constantly prove how smart they are. They understand something essential. Real intelligence means listening more than speaking. Because listening isn't just about being polite, it's about staying open to growth. Take Michael, for instance. He was a manager at a major corporation, well-educated, confident, and quick to share his thoughts. Too quick, in fact. In every meeting, he took over the discussion, often interrupting others and dismissing their suggestions. He didn't just talk, he talked over people. And worse, he often mocked ideas he didn't agree with, making others feel small. One time, after a major project fell apart, Michael immediately shifted the blame to his team. His excuse? They didn't understand my vision. But the truth was crystal clear. His refusal to listen, to collaborate, and to consider other viewpoints had derailed the entire project. When his boss finally asked him to reflect, Michael couldn't offer a single meaningful insight. Why? Because his arrogance had clouded his judgment so completely that he couldn't see his own role in the failure. Humility, in contrast, doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself less. It's the mindset that values learning over ego and contribution over personal recognition. Stoic philosophy reminds us, true wisdom emerges when we're willing to say, I was wrong, when we're open to learning from mistakes, not just our own, but others as well. If you ever catch yourself feeling the need to prove you're right, pause and ask, do I want to be admired, or do I want to grow? Wisdom isn't about making others feel small, it's about lifting others up. The truly wise don't use knowledge to show off. They use it to connect, to empower, and to elevate. And that brings us to the fourth sign of foolishness, one that reveals itself not in words, but in the absence of something deeper. The fourth sign, lack of empathy. Empathy, or the lack of it, is one of the clearest windows into a person's inner world. A person who can't understand, acknowledge, or even imagine someone else's feelings is living in isolation, not necessarily physically, but emotionally. And this disconnection doesn't just harm relationships, it stunts character. Let me share a story. Paul was a colleague I worked with years ago. Sharp mind, excellent at numbers, but cold in his approach. He often complained about delays in projects, never pausing to ask why they happened or what people might be going through. One day, a team member named Susan missed an important deadline. Her young son had been hospitalized with a serious illness, but Paul didn't ask. He didn't show concern. Instead, he criticized her publicly in front of the team, scolding her for being unprofessional. The room went silent, not out of agreement, but out of disbelief. Paul had reduced Susan's pain to a performance metric, but life has a way of teaching us the very lessons we refuse to learn. A year later, Paul found himself in a similar situation. His mother had fallen gravely ill, and he was suddenly forced to juggle work, caregiving, and emotional stress. Only then, when he needed understanding, did he realize how deeply he'd failed to give it. Empathy isn't a weakness. It's a strength. It's what connects us, heals us, and reminds us that we're human. And in the next part, we'll explore how the absence of this connection often shows up in an even more damaging way through impulsive, uncontrolled actions. In the last part, we saw how a lack of empathy doesn't just harm others, it cuts us off from the lessons and connections that make life meaningful. But what happens when fear keeps us frozen in place, resisting life's natural flow? The fifth sign, fear of change. Many people believe staying in their comfort zone keeps them safe, but in truth, the comfort zone is a beautifully decorated cage. It feels familiar, even cozy, but it quietly locks the door on growth, curiosity, and possibility. People who fear change cling to the old ways, even when those ways no longer serve them. They hold on, not because they're certain it's the best way forward, but because the unknown feels too overwhelming. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. No matter how tightly you grip, it slips away. Let's return to Michael, not the corporate manager, but a different Michael, a man who had lived his entire life in a small neighborhood. He knew the streets by heart, the neighbors by name, and the rhythm of daily life gave him comfort. It was home in every sense of the word, but life began to shift. His children had grown up and moved to a new city. Familiar shops began to close. Old friends moved away. Still, when his kids suggested he join them for better opportunities, his answer was firm. "Why should I leave? I know everyone here." He was holding on to a version of life that no longer existed, and for a while, that fear of the unfamiliar kept him stuck. But eventually, change forced his hand. As the neighborhood evolved beyond recognition, Michael realized that the world wouldn't stop turning just because he stood still. So he moved, hesitantly at first, to be closer to his family. And what he discovered was nothing short of life-changing. The new environment didn't just offer comfort, it brought new friendships, new routines, and even a renewed sense of purpose. The life he had feared was actually the life he never knew he needed. Fear of change doesn't protect us, it holds us back. It blinds us to the beauty waiting on the other side of discomfort. Stoic philosophy reminds us that change is not the enemy, it's the essence of life. Everything flows, everything evolves. And only by stepping into that current with openness can we live fully, deeply, and freely. If you feel resistance to change rising within you, ask yourself, is this fear protecting me or limiting me? Now, as we move into the final sign of foolishness, prepare to confront something that often disguises itself as boldness, but is, in fact, the enemy of wisdom itself. Previously, we saw how fearing change can keep us stuck in outdated patterns, while the world continues evolving around us. Now, let's shift focus to something equally limiting, something that happens in everyday conversations, often without us even noticing. The sixth sign, talking more than listening. Have you ever been in a conversation where one person completely dominates the room, interrupting, over-explaining, and acting like they have all the answers? That's not confidence. That's a warning sign. Talking more than listening is a classic trait of foolishness. You'll often see it in family dynamics. A relative who treats every conversation like a stage, refusing to pause or let others speak. They love hearing their own voice, but show little interest in others' thoughts. And slowly, that self-centered behavior begins to erode trust and connection. Let me tell you about someone like that, John, a father I once knew. Every evening at the dinner table, John made the conversations revolve around himself. His children would start sharing stories about their day, excited about school projects or funny things that happened with friends. But before they could finish a sentence, John would cut in with his stories, long, elaborate tales from his past again and again. When his wife gently offered suggestions to improve their finances, he brushed her off. "I know what I'm doing," he'd say, without really hearing her concerns. To him, listening wasn't necessary. His voice was the only one that mattered. What John didn't see was the damage he was causing. His children started sharing less. His wife grew quiet. The family didn't feel heard. They felt dismissed, overshadowed, and unimportant. And all the while, John thought he was leading the family with wisdom, when in fact, he was slowly pushing them away. Listening is not a passive act. It's a powerful form of connection. It requires intention, respect, and humility. It means quieting the voice in your own head long enough to hear someone else's truth. Stoic philosophy teaches us that silence is sacred, not because there's nothing to say, but because true wisdom often speaks in the spaces between words. When we talk without listening, it's like planting seeds in barren soil. Nothing will grow. So if any part of John's story resonates with you, don't panic. But don't ignore it either. Next time your child wants to talk about their day, or your partner brings up something that matters to them, try this. Pause, make eye contact, truly listen, not with the intent to reply, but with the intent to understand. That small act could be the difference between creating a home filled with love and one clouded by silence, because in the end, the wise person listens to understand. The foolish one only waits for their turn to speak. Now, we've walked through all 6 signs of a foolish person, but before you rush to judge yourself or someone else, let's take a breath. Because here's the truth. Every one of us, at some point, has fallen into one or more of these traps. So, we've explored how talking more than listening can quietly fracture our closest relationships. But now comes the real question. What do we do with all this? Let's be honest. At some point, all of us have talked too much without truly listening, blamed others instead of reflecting, resisted change out of fear. And that's okay, because recognizing these 6 signs isn't about judgment, it's about growth. The key takeaway here is simple yet powerful. Awareness is the beginning of wisdom. Stoic philosophy reminds us that true wisdom doesn't come from being right all the time. It comes from being willing to be wrong and learning from it. It's about choosing humility over pride, responsibility over excuses, and curiosity over fear. Each of the so-called foolish traits we've discussed, they're not a life sentence. They're invitations, golden opportunities to evolve into a wiser, more grounded version of ourselves. So, if you found yourself resonating with any of the signs, whether it was arrogance, fear of change, or a habit of interrupting, take a deep breath. That awareness alone is already a step forward. The real difference between the foolish and the wise isn't perfection. It's courage. The courage to ask, can I do better? And then actually try. Step outside your comfort zone. Embrace discomfort. Listen with intent. Own your flaws. Be open to change. Because this journey of wisdom, it's not reserved for the flawless. It's carved by those bold enough to face themselves honestly, and always remember this: stupidity is temporary, but wisdom is a lifelong pursuit. You're not alone on this path. Keep learning, keep evolving, and let each step, each moment of reflection bring you closer to the person you were meant to become. Thank you for joining me on this journey of insight and awareness.